The Z supporters are in mourning. The occupiers group has been trapped in a cauldron. The Ukrainian delegation is in the USA. Trump talks about progress in the negotiations. Then Lukashenko is getting ready to visit Donald at home. A black day for Russian aviation. Helicopters are expensive reconnaissance aircraft has been spotted in the skies over Ukraine. The Russian State Duma is proposing to ban Russians from traveling abroad. Instead of ordinary Russians, it will be the Russian army heading overseas. Moscow is turning into Pyongyang, drawing inspiration from Beijing and Tehran, and the protests of Siberian farmers continue. What is happening in the hottest spot in Russia? About this and more, I, Fedor Shirenko, will tell you in this episode of News Today, right after you like this video. Hundreds of occupiers have been trapped in a cauldron. The Z patriots have declared mourning for a large group of Russians whom the command abandoned in encircled Kupyansk.
What are the war correspondents writing about? A feat that will never be officially recognized. Today, many war correspondents and military bloggers have already reported the sad news. Namely, that the remaining guys who for 100 days were completely surrounded, receiving supplies by drones, defended the ruins of the Kupyansk City Clinical Hospital have fallen in an unequal battle.
A new war is no obstacle to old negotiations. Donald Trump stated that U.S. involvement in the war in the Middle East does not affect Washington's participation in negotiations with Kyiv and Moscow.
How does Operation Epic Fury affect negotiations with the Russians regarding Ukraine? And
What about them?
have the negotiations now taken a back seat because of the war?
No, we're discussing it. I think everything will be settled.
When do you expect the next round of negotiations?
They take place almost every day. We've made great progress.
This morning, a Ukrainian delegation led by Kirilo Budanov arrived in Miami for talks with Trump's special envoys, Sylvitkov and Jared Kushner. Earlier, as reported by Politico, Kirill Dmitriev visited the United States. Putin's envoy offered the U.S. a deal. The Kremlin would stop providing intelligence to Tehran in exchange for a similar move by the White House regarding Ukraine. Trump refused the Russian dictator. Following Dmitriev, yet another servant of Putin set out to bow before the U.S. president, Alexander Lukashenko. According to the Belarusian dictator, Trump invited him to his home in Mar-a-Lago. In the
third round, they said, here we are, ready. Donald is offering a big deal and to meet because he has a home in Florida to discuss and come to an agreement. Always.
Could it be that Lukashenko is planning to run under the wing of a new master? The US has lifted some sanctions from Belarus, and Lukashenko is getting ready to fly to Donald's home. How did the Belarusian dictator earn Trump's leniency, and what does the easing of restrictions mean for relations between Belarus and Russia? We'll explain in this report.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Years under sanctions. Now once again, the Belarusian Ministry of Finance, Banks and Potash Enterprises can operate without American restrictions. This is the result of Lukashenko's meeting with the American delegation the day before, on March 19th.
It's as if there's no war. These wars and problems have no effect on you at all.
In response, the Belarusian dictator agreed to pardon 250 political prisoners. But the American delegation did not go to the negotiations in Minsk to decide the fate of the prisoners. Donald Trump sent his people to lure Lukashenko to his side. And we are not talking about the war in Ukraine, but about China.
For quite some time now, the People's Republic of China has been viewing Belarus as a kind of springboard for the future, for example, as a way for China to access European markets. There was even a period when, due to the sanctions policy against Russia, Belarus made good money from this trade and served as a bridge between Europe, in essence, the European market, and the Russian market. And China also wanted to take advantage of this. Let me remind you that the People's Republic of China has invested a great deal in Belarus.
And it was for this, essentially, that Lukashenko received perks in the form of eased sanctions.
Restrictions will be lifted from the Belarusian Ministry of Finance, the Development Bank of Belarus, and Belinvest Bank. In addition, the Belarusian Potash Company and Belarus will be removed from the United States sanctions list. Potash. They are the main producers of potash fertilizers.
Of course, neither side will officially acknowledge this, Publicly, the Americans say that they are genuinely interested in Lukashenko's opinion on geopolitical issues.
We also engaged in a detailed discussion about what people in Iran and Belarus currently feel regarding the ongoing war, what people in the US think about the war in Iran, and the specific ways in which this complex situation is continuing to develop. It is always very valuable to get the opinion of your president, the president of Belarus, because it is a completely different perspective compared to what we can get in the West. Oh.
Yes, a different one. Lukashenko openly says that the US is attacking his friends.
You are fighting against our friends, and I am ready to talk openly about this topic.
But even despite this, Batka is a leader, kind and understanding, so he forgave Trump even such mistakes.
I still, despite certain mistakes as I see them in the United States, remain a supporter of your president.
In short, the visit from the Americans greatly flattered the ego of the Belarusian dictator. But Batka has another reason to be happy. He is being invited to Washington for a meeting with Trump. According to experts, the Americans, of course, wanted to demonstrate their strength to Putin.
This is also a signal to the Russian leadership that even in your so-called sphere of influence we can play our own games and your satellites will still pay close attention to what we say and do. Because we, the United States, are the ones everyone wants to have good relations with.
So the logical question is, how will Lukashenko's relationship with his powerful bunker ally develop after this? Especially considering that this is not the end of cooperation between the US and Belarus. After all, in particular, we're talking about resuming the work of the American embassy in Belarus.
We have, once again, held extensive consultations with the US State Department and other involved agencies. Work is underway in this direction. I can't give you any specific dates, but the work is ongoing.
But does this mean that Lukashenko is abandoning Putin? No, the cunning, mustachioed Colorado beetle will once again try to sit on two chairs at once.
This also gives Lukashenko reasons to think that if something happens, if Russia starts to pressure him in terms of direct involvement in the war against Ukraine, he can take advantage of US support, and Russia will have to treat him a bit differently. So this is also coming from Lukashenko's side. It's a certain kind of game. He is showing Moscow, you consider me your complete satellite, but I can once again do the splits and sit on the fence.
The Institute for the Study of War is confident that the lifting of US sanctions against Belarus will directly benefit the Russian economy.
The Institute for the Study of War has long concluded that Russia has effectively annexed Belarus and that both countries possess a unified defense industrial base. Therefore, the lifting of sanctions by the United States against Belarus directly benefits Russia's military efforts.
The removal of American sanctions is good for Belarus. But what is much more important is the lifting of European restrictions, and that is not going to happen. At least for now. Of course, the issue of security also plays an important role. As long as Belarus remains so closely linked to Russia, it is a threat to Europe. But the US gave it anyway. Chance?
Lukashenko. This is also a hint to Belarus that don't do anything stupid and don't do anything wrong. And if Lukashenko plays by the rules and doesn't fuel this hysteria about the Suwałki corridor and so on, then obviously, even if only a little, his image will improve. The main thing for him here is just not to be remembered too much, you understand? And not to get involved in any new stories. So he'll just sit there quietly behind the scenes. He is actually quite satisfied that all the attention is focused on Russia.
But will the Belarusian dictator justify the credit of trust? Time will tell.
The helicopter downfall in Russia continues. ZID military correspondents have raised a massive outcry. In the past 24 hours, the occupiers have already lost a second K-52 helicopter.
It's not a good morning. We've lost another machine. The reasons are still unclear. Trouble never comes alone. A Ka-52 has been lost. One of the crew members was killed.
Let me remind you that earlier, the Ukrainian armed forces destroyed a Russian Alligator helicopter near Pokrovsk using an FPV drone. The cost of foreign analogs of this Russian helicopter is about $16 million. What's even more important is that besides the helicopters, the occupiers are losing something much rarer, trained crews, who, following the aircraft, were eliminated by Ukrainian drone operators. They've been thoroughly demilitarized. Russian propaganda is in shock. While Putin and his gang tried to put on a brave face in a losing game up in the sky, a Swedish Sub-340 airborne early warning aircraft has been spotted over Ukraine. Kyiv has received a total of 2 such aircraft from Stockholm. These Swedish birds are very rare and important instruments of war, which Ukraine could only dream of before the full-scale invasion. Let me remind you that earlier the Ukrainian General Staff confirmed a strike on one of the last remaining Russian A-50 AWACS aircraft. This aircraft was undergoing maintenance in the Novgorod region where the airfield was hit. This flying radar cost $500 million. It is literally the eyes of the Russians in their air control system. Crimea, during the course of last night, did not sleep. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported one of the largest drone attacks on the occupied peninsula. Explosions were heard in Sevastopol, Simferopol, and the surrounding areas.
All over the house, all the windows in the house were just blown out.
In addition to the occupied peninsula, waves of drone strikes also hit Russian territory. In Saratov and Engels, the target was an oil refinery, while in Tolyatti, drones struck 2 chemical plants. In Tolyatti, these were the Kaustik and Koibyshev Azot plants, which are located close to each other. According to calculations by Z military bloggers, nearly 500 drones attacked Russia and the occupied territories in total. The curtain falls. Instead of Bali and Barcelona, Russians are being told to go to Vyborg. The patience of the State Duma asylum never cease to amaze. Deputy Vitaly Milonov has proposed banning Russians from traveling abroad. According to Milonov, due to the difficult geopolitical situation, Russians should vacation within the country. The all-inclusive resorts in Turkey and Egypt, so beloved by Russian citizens, are for riffraff. And instead of sunny Bali and Barcelona, Milonov suggests that Russians travel to the depressingly rainy St. Petersburg. Choice. For ordinary Russians, the borders will be closed, while for the occupying army, it will provide a pretext for war with Europe. The madness is ready. The legalization of Putin's aggression is gaining strength. A bill has been submitted to the State Duma, granting Putin the right to send troops into other countries to protect Russians. It feels like this nonsense was submitted to the Russian State Duma because of the Kremlin's possible future aggression towards Estonia. Here are the details. And
Putin wants to protect Russians abroad. The corresponding document, developed by the Ministry of Defense, was submitted to the State Duma by the government and published on the website of the lower house. The bill expands the Russian dictator's powers to use the armed forces abroad, supposedly to protect Russians, in case they are arrested or prosecuted by foreign courts.
So that everything looks legally clear. So that, as they say, not even a fly could find fault with it. That's why they want to adopt these changes. Corresponding legislative initiatives are being submitted to the State Duma. There is a criminal article in Russian law for starting a war. And essentially, why was the word war never used in the Russian media space? Because starting a war is prohibited by the Russian criminal code. That's why they specifically talked about a military operation.
The draft law specifies situations where Russian citizens are arrested or detained abroad by courts that have authority without Russia's participation, as well as by international judicial bodies that Moscow does not recognize. In such cases, the head of state, that is Putin, will be able to make decisions about the extraterritorial use of the army to protect compatriots. In other words, he could supposedly legally send troops wherever and whenever he wants.
All these actions are linked specifically to an attempt to create such a distracting effect. To drown out the information that the economy is heading towards disaster. And it has already been repeatedly stated that the war Russia started 4 years ago, and it was said that if Ukraine does not surrender, this war will continue until the last Ukrainian. In fact, this war is turning into a war until the last ruble in the Russian treasury. And everything is heading toward the point where that last ruble may not be far off.
According to media reports, the bill was submitted to the State Duma against the backdrop of a series of warnings from NATO and European intelligence agencies about the possible preparation of Russia for a conflict with one or several alliance countries.
Undoubtedly, there is a lot of talk about this right now. Some are talking about Narva, That's in Estonia, on Estonian territory, where there are many Russian speakers. They say Russia might start there. Moreover, among those theorists who are modeling where Russia's next strike might be, they don't discuss whether it will happen or not. They say it will happen. They simply choose the point where it will take place. The most popular scenario so far is considered to be the Suwalki corridor. This, let me remind you, is the territory between the Republic of Belarus and Russia's Kaliningrad region along the border of Poland and Lithuania. The second version, which has been gaining even more popularity and momentum lately, is the Estonia scenario, the Narva scenario. This is Narva, a region of Estonia bordering Russia, where there is a large Russian-speaking population. It is said that there could be a strike there in order to test whether NATO would react or not, because the conflicts we are currently seeing within NATO, when there is no coordination between the US and European countries, are leading Russia to think that NATO is not a force, that NATO is a paper tiger.
The current legislation in Russia already allows the use of troops abroad to repel attacks on the country's military formations by an aggressor, to protect another state at its request, to protect citizens from armed attacks, and to combat piracy. The new bill introduces amendments to the laws on defense and citizenship, giving more freedom for military intervention.
As the government is, so are the role models it sets. Chinese communists and Iranian Islamists are inspiring the Russian authorities to new repressive feats. According to Reuters, the Russian authorities are preparing for a major internet crackdown and are borrowing large-scale blocking methods from China and Iran. The Kremlin has ordered the relevant agencies to develop a mechanism for blocking entire segments of the internet, both mobile and fixed, while simultaneously controlling online communications. As a result, inspired by Beijing and Tehran, Moscow will gradually turn into Pyongyang. It seems the Kremlin is actively digging its own grave. The police are arresting yesterday's heroes of the special military operation who are bluntly speaking the truth about the lawlessness created by officials, let alone ordinary Russians, who in desperation are demanding that their rights be respected. They aren't even considered people anymore. This repressive machine is only fueling protest sentiments even more. Let's keep watching.
The flyman. Don't touch her, because if she has a heart attack, that's it. If you try to lift her, she's done for.
She and strokes.
If that's the case, she'll have one right here on the spot.
The war for livestock in Siberia is gaining momentum. After meetings with officials, farmers whose herds have been ordered to be slaughtered can't take it anymore. Officials spit in the faces of outraged peasants, saying they're not the ones driving them to despair.
A person can just collapse
Without...
any livestock at all.
Of course not.
And on top of that, they say she just slipped and fell on her own. Who will be held responsible for this? This isn't the destruction of livestock, it's the destruction of people. They torment people without any shame or conscience. They've only just announced that they will be destroying the livestock. But what will happen to her when they come to take the livestock? And if something happens to her, my father won't be able to take it. Because of your rotten policies and greed, I will lose both my parents at once. What did we do to deserve this? People are living in terrible anticipation. Mom said she doesn't give a damn. Dad too, he might do something to himself.
A column of Oman has once again come to the village of Koziha. Its name is now known throughout all of Russia.
You don't believe in anything anymore. Not in the authorities, not in anything. March 20th, Koziha. Here they come. Look at that whole motorcade. Look how many of them there are. I'm just at a loss for words. That's it, curtain down. This is how the authorities treat us. Treat citizens who are asking for help to sort things out and to put an end to this lawlessness.
Just yesterday, the officials left here empty-handed. The local farmer was supposedly given permission for an independent inspection, but the very next day, they destroyed his entire farm. The female farmer, from whom the official ran away and who had repeatedly staged solo protests outside the regional authorities building, was detained by the police.
They forcibly brought me to the police station, apparently because they want to find out about my husband's rights. It's about some property case, Article 167, for arson committed by a group of people involving property worth $1,054,000, which was supposedly supposed to burn down, but now they've apparently decided to add the arson charge because we're fighting for our rights.
So they brought you in by force? Did you receive any calls?
No, I didn't receive any calls or summons. I'm openly available to everyone on V-Contact. I go everywhere, to the prosecutor's offices, to the administration, to Travnikov's reception office. No one has ever contacted me. I've been wandering around the city of Novosibirsk for a week now.
The authorities threw a veterinary doctor under the fire of public outrage. You
are dodging the question specifically. What we have here is a mass tragedy. Right now, they're not killing in the shelter. But you're reducing the problem to just one person, Svetlana.
Because no, I mean specifically, violations are complete.
Right now, I ask you, let's move on to the situation of an uncontrolled discussion. Once again,
I repeat, invite us into your office, not out in the hallway. Just a second, just a second.
Everything will be arranged in accordance with what you are asking for, and there will be a meeting. For some reason, all the
routes are documented. And what's surprising is, in the Novosibirsk region, the Kremlin got exactly what it had cultivated itself. The new Russian elite, the heroes of the special military operation, stood up for the locals. A public figure came to the region to fight against lawlessness. A veteran of Chechnya and the so-called special military operation, recipient of the Order of Courage, Ivan Otrakovsky.
You could say it's all talk. They're trying to mislead people, to make it seem as if all this is being done for the good of the people, for the good of the cattle, to stop the spread of this terrible, unknown infection that appeared out of nowhere, that mutates and everything else. We, according to the actions of the officials, we and the officials see that this is a lie, that they are trying to deceive, even though... And they mislead people, claiming that supposedly some farmers are already on their side. And here again we see that even in this they are lying. Well, how can you trust them? It's lie upon lie. That's it. We stand up for our people. We stand up for the people. We fight for our rights. To all police officers and Oman personnel, do not carry out the criminal orders of the occupiers.
If in Siberia the rebels are seeking support from veterans, then in Astrakhan they are asking for help through a blogger and human rights activist. They have their own troubles there. A local businessman is catching cows and sending them to the slaughterhouse. Law enforcement and the administration are doing nothing.
They take away the livestock, drive them off the fields.
And the police came. We thought we were expecting help from them. They did nothing, not even moved a finger.
On what grounds did they take everything? Did you provide them with anything?
Grounds. They didn't show anything. They said it was a private enterprise. They didn't say the cattle were ownerless, just that they didn't have the paperwork.
But it wasn't just about the cattle. Builders of the cancer center in Murmansk also complained about being treated like animals.
There, the contractor is a scoundrel. He didn't pay my acquaintances for the work they did. He stiffed a crew of 17 people, saying it wasn't according to the project, but they deliberately changed the project 5 times. And after that, I see him with a new one. He pulls up in a BMW. They cheat everyone out of money. The deadlines are constantly being extended. Apparently, they're laundering money.
The workers were literally furious. Demanding their unpaid wages, the construction workers locked themselves in the tower crane and staged a protest. Traffic police, the National Guard, and patrol officers stormed the construction site. The rebels even got into a fight with law enforcement.
That's all the news for this hour. Stay up to date with the most interesting events around the world together with News Today. Watch all episodes on our channel, subscribe and like so you don't lose track of us on the internet.